Globalisation has revolutionised the world. It has inspired worldwide diversity, developed constant communication, and technological advances mean that you can receive products from around the world at the touch of a button. Friedman has stated that globalisation is enabling individuals, corporations, and nation-states to reach around the world farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before. But how is this possible? And at what detriment is this to the cultures and diversities of the world? There are said to be three main theories of globalisation, these being culture, competition, and conflict. In this video we'll focus upon globalisation within the context of competition and aim to view the influence of this within the educational sector. Within the world, globalisation has increased competition dramatically, with the whole world competing against each other to provide either the cheapest products or the best quality products. This drive for worldwide competition has led to businesses arguably providing more innovative products, producing better quality products, and providing more efficient service in order to not only compete against a market of global traders, but to also draw in worldwide business. However, where does education fit into all of this? G20 has stated that a skilled workforce is needed in order to produce a strong, sustainable and balanced growth, and that the first critical element in securing this is to ensure that all children attend school in order to produce a foundation for future training. For example, in India, an up-and-coming developing country, there are still only a reported 2% of the nation that are classified as skilled workers, and this is limiting the growth of the economy. This is vital, as the World Bank and USAID have suggested that economic growth is the best means to improving standards of living, and thus it is suggested that through raising standards of education and subsequently the number of skilled workers within a country, this will raise a country's economic growth and will also serve to have a ripple effect upon the standards of living. However, the World Bank have also said that all individuals should have access to education, even if an immediate economic benefit cannot be seen. Sen also argues for a redefinement of the concept of development. Rather than monitoring this through terms of economic growth, it should be viewed through freedoms, opportunities and rights of individuals, essentially arguing the fact that education should be a fundamental right rather than being viewed as an investment. However, this is far from a new school of thinking. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 stated that education shall be free and should be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. This has been carried on through goals set by the Education for All movement, whilst the Millennium Developmental Goals have fought to achieve a universal primary education. However, regardless of these policies, a staggering 61 million children are failing to learn, primarily due to having a lack of access to school or receiving a poor standard of teaching, leading to 1/3 of children not achieving the basics. This equates to a staggering 250 million children being unable to read and write. However, a quarter to a half of those who have graduated from primary school still cannot read a single sentence. Therefore, there is an argument that whilst education is supposed to help our children achieve a better future for both the individual and the wider economy, is education in these developing countries actually helping these children at all if they are leaving without even the basics of knowledge? Griffin states that governments subscribe to the notion that inclusion in formal education is a means to overcoming poverty and promoting national, economic and social development. However, the poor quality of teaching being exhibited in these countries undermines this development. James Stanfield states that this is being spurred along by a lack of accountability within the education sector, and thus, whilst free primary education is expected to be a universal right, the result unfortunately is subsequently a subpar education system, with teachers who lack a knowledge of pedagogy and do not have adequate resources to be able to teach to a high standard. However, let's view this in the context of Tanzania. Tanzania's primary education is free. However, there is an expectation of parents to pay for school supplies and school uniform. Over the course of the Education for All agenda, primary enrolment in Tanzania has increased from 41% in 2004 to 83% in 2012. Although it is important to bear in mind that these are enrolment figures, not attendance figures. However, this surge in enrolment has arguably not been met in terms of teacher training. In 2005, the standard of qualifications needed to be a teacher raised from a grade B/C to a grade A, which meant that 45% of teachers were deemed unqualified for their posts. However, the retraining of these teachers has been a slow process, meaning that in 2011, an average of only 42% of primary teachers had the basic knowledge to be able to teach a grade 4 class. Whilst the Education for All agenda is pushing for all children to be educated, questions arise whether these countries can keep up with the demand of good quality teaching staff that is needed to fulfil this goal. This question is further exposed in Tanzania, as the average class size is 47 pupils to one teacher, highlighting this shortage. Although James Stanfield's raised concerns over the lack of accountability of teachers is certainly applicable to the teaching being exhibited in Tanzania. A report found that on a daily basis in Tanzania, 1/5 of the teachers are absent from work. And the World Bank have also stated that on an average day, only 2 hours and 4 minutes worth of teaching takes place in the average school, with this decreasing to 1 hour and 24 minutes in urban settings. Therefore, this lack of accountability of teachers and the subsequent poor quality of teaching taking place can arguably be viewed in the knowledge and understanding exhibited by the children, with less than 1 in 10 children in Standard 3 being unable to read a Standard 2 story, and 6 out of 10 Standard 3 children being unable to complete a Standard 2 maths test. Shields states that national governments have very little choice in committing to the Education for All agenda. By refusing to do so, they will be condemned as cruel dictatorships that deprive their population of basic human rights. So therefore, while some countries have tried to implement the Education for All agenda, the current state of affairs of the country may inhibit their ability to fully commit to the programme. This could be due to factors such as lack of social structure or lack of available funding for education. For example, Tanzania has had renewed efforts on its educational policy since the 1990s, with acts such as the Education Sector Development Programme and the Education and Training Master Plan. However, a lack of funding and economic turmoil led to Tanzania implementing cost-share measures for health and education, which had a devastating effect and resulted in sharply declining primary school enrolment rates. Therefore, whilst the United Nations experts have argued that educational investment is one of the best long-term financial investments, finding a balance between educational investment and further priorities is undoubtedly hard for countries with a tough economic climate. For example, whilst the enrolment figures have raised in schools, still only 4 out of 10 of these primary schools have access to clean drinking water. Therefore, the investment from more economically stable countries is essential to aiding the progression of these developing countries, so they are able to have a full focus upon education without conflicting agendas. Although, it is evident that Tanzania's government fully recognises the importance of education. This can be viewed through their implementation of the Primary Education Development Programme in 2001, which aimed to expand school access, improve education quality, and increase school retention at the primary level, and this was helped to be funded through the World Bank. So far, we have looked at the expansion of school access and the quality of education being provided, so let's have a look at the retention figures. The attendance levels in 2010 demonstrates this rise in primary retention. However, the sharp decline in retention upon hitting age 14, in particular the steep decline in females, is alarming. Although the Act aimed to raise primary retention, the lack of effect this has had upon secondary enrolment indicates to a flaw within the education system. Whilst compulsory primary attendance is clearly raising figures, it does not appear to be encouraging an engagement or a love of learning. So whilst this increased primary enrolment is a stepping stone in the right direction, for more lasting change, perhaps more needs to be done to increase secondary enrolment. Shields has argued that children who will become agricultural labourers study fractions, villagers in remote regions learn about chemical reactions, and members in marginalised groups who will never see a ballot box study their national constitution. Clearly, the educational process needs to be in response to the cultures and the needs of not only the country, but also the community that it serves. Although who determines what knowledge somebody does or does not need? Isn't the Education for All agenda about empowering people and giving everyone the opportunity to succeed? Therefore, the opportunity to carry on learning and applying knowledge into secondary is vital to be able to further this empowerment. In light of the raised level of school access, but the questionable quality of education and retention figures, clearly the Education for All agenda is encouraging change, However, it also needs to be ensured that this makes a lasting impact, not just a raise in figures. Therefore, does the education being provided allow for this lasting impact, or does it simply put children back in the same situation with unnecessary knowledge? If parents cannot afford to pay for secondary education for their children, the purpose of primary education as an empowerment becomes obsolete, as this cannot be pursued. And in terms of globalisation and competition, the need for this empowerment to transcend into opportunities is a crucial aspect that needs to be translated to see the full benefits of education within Tanzania, and thus a free secondary enrolment could inspire a generational trend to pursue knowledge and increase its productivity.